The parking lot was emptying when Marcus Hayes heard the voices. They carried that particular tone he had learned to recognize during 2 decades of hunting, the sound predators made when they had cornered something weaker. He was loading groceries into the trunk of his pickup when the laughter cut through the evening air, followed by a woman's voice saying, "Please," in a way that made his hands stop moving. Most people would have finished loading and driven away. Marcus had been most people once. That was before Afghanistan, before he became someone who could not ignore certain sounds anymore. The grocery store sat at the edge of a strip mall in rural Montana, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and strangers were noticed. It was 7 p.m. in October, the sun already setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that Marcus would have appreciated if he were not listening to what was happening 3 rows over. Marcus was 51 years old with the kind of build that came from a lifetime of physical work rather than gym memberships. His hair had gone grey at the temples, and his face showed the weathering of someone who had spent most of his life outdoors. He wore jeans and a flannel shirt, unremarkable except for the way he held himself, a stillness that suggested he was always aware of his surroundings. He had been a Marine sniper for 12 years, followed by 8 years working as a professional hunting guide in Alaska. Now he lived alone in a cabin 40 miles from town, managing a small ranch and trying to find peace in solitude. His wife had left him 6 years ago, unable to live with the man who had come back from war. His daughter was 23 and lived in Seattle, calling once a month out of obligation more than affection. Marcus understood why they had left. He had brought something dark back with him, something that could not be explained to people who had never seen what he had seen. So he lived quietly, kept to himself, and tried to leave the violence behind. But violence had a way of finding you, even in Montana grocery store parking lots. The voices grew louder. Marcus closed his trunk carefully and started walking toward the sound, not hurrying, just moving with the deliberate pace of someone who had made a decision and was following through. 3 rows over, he saw them. 4 teenagers, probably 17 or 18, had surrounded a woman near her car. She was in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing scrubs that suggested she worked at the hospital or clinic. Her name was Sarah Chen, though Marcus did not know that yet. She was a nurse who had just finished a 12-hour shift and wanted nothing more than to drive home to her apartment and collapse. The teenagers had other plans. The leader stood directly in front of her car door, blocking her path. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a letter jacket that marked him as a football player at the local high school. His name was Tyler Mitchell, and he was the kind of kid who had learned early that size and aggression got him what he wanted. The other 3 formed a loose semicircle behind him, cutting off her escape routes. Tyler grinned, the expression carrying cruelty disguised as playfulness. "Come on, don't be like that. We just want to talk. You're pretty when you smile." Sarah's voice came back tight with controlled fear. "I need to get to my car. Please move." One of the others, a shorter kid with a buzz cut named Jake, laughed. "She said please. That's polite. But you know what would be more polite? Giving us your number." The third teenager, skinny with acne scars, chimed in. "Yeah, or maybe you could give us a ride somewhere. You got a nice car." The fourth stayed quiet, but positioned himself to block the gap between vehicles, making sure Sarah had nowhere to go. Sarah tried to step around Tyler. He moved with her, staying in her path. It was a game to them, Marcus realized. They were not planning to hurt her, at least not yet, but they enjoyed the power of making her afraid. They fed off her discomfort like predators tasting blood. Marcus had seen this behavior before. In war zones, young men with guns and no supervision learned quickly that they could take what they wanted from people who could not fight back. These teenagers had not learned that lesson with violence yet, but they were heading there. Someone needed to teach them differently. He crossed the parking lot with measured steps, his boots making soft sounds on the asphalt. He was 30 feet away when Tyler noticed him, the kid's peripheral vision catching movement. Tyler's head turned slightly, his grin still in place, but his eyes calculating whether this new factor mattered. Marcus kept walking, his face neutral, his hands at his sides. He did not look aggressive. He looked like someone running an errand, except for his eyes. His eyes carried something that made Tyler's grin falter. When Marcus was 10 feet away, Tyler straightened up, trying to reassert dominance. "This is a private conversation, old man. Keep walking." Marcus stopped. He stood in a way that seemed casual, but actually positioned him between Sarah and the teenagers. He did not speak immediately. He just looked at Tyler, then at each of the other three, his gaze moving slowly, cataloguing details. Tyler's clenched fists, Jake's nervous shifting, the skinny kid's attempt to look tough, the quiet one's hand moving toward his pocket. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice quiet but carrying clearly in the evening air. "The lady asked you to move. You should do that." Tyler's expression shifted from confusion to anger. "Who the hell are you? Her dad? Someone who's asking you to walk away." Jake laughed, the sound forced. "There's 4 of us and 1 of you? Maybe you should walk away." Marcus did not react to the threat. He had faced actual danger enough times to know that 4 scared teenagers did not constitute real danger, just potential danger. And potential could be managed if you understood how predators thought. He spoke again, still quiet, still calm. "I'm going to count to 5. If you're still standing here at 5, we're going to have a problem you don't want." Tyler took a step forward, trying to use his height advantage. "You threatening us? Because I could call the cops and tell them some old guy is harassing us." "1," Marcus said. Something in his voice made the quiet teenager take a step back. It was not aggression or anger. It was certainty. The absolute lack of doubt that suggested Marcus knew exactly what would happen if they stayed. And he was completely comfortable with it. "This is bullshit," Jake said, but his voice had lost its edge. 2. Sarah, still pressed against her car, watched this unfold with wide eyes. She had been afraid of the teenagers, but now she felt something different. A strange calm that came from watching someone who was absolutely in control of the situation. "You're crazy," Tyler said, but he took a half step back. 3. The skinny kid grabbed Tyler's arm. "Man, let's just go. This isn't worth it." Tyler shook him off, but his confidence was crumbling. He had been in a few fights, won most of them against kids his own age. But Marcus was something different. Marcus carried himself like someone who had killed before and would not hesitate to do it again if necessary. 4. "Screw this," the quiet teenager said, and turned to walk away. The skinny kid followed immediately. That left Tyler and Jake. Marcus's hand moved slightly, a tiny adjustment that brought his weight onto the balls of his feet. Anyone trained would recognize the shift, preparation for action. Tyler saw it and finally understood that this was not a bluff. "Whatever," Tyler muttered. "She's not even that hot anyway." He backed away, trying to save face. Jake followed, both of them moving quickly toward a truck parked at the far end of the lot. Marcus did not watch them go. He kept his eyes on them until they were 20 feet away, then turned to Sarah. "You okay?" Sarah let out a breath she had been holding. Yes. Thank you. They wouldn't let me leave." "I saw. Were you really going to fight all 4 of them?" Marcus considered the question. Probably wouldn't have needed to. Most bullies fold when someone pushes back. He paused. "But if they hadn't left? Yes." Sarah studied him for a moment, seeing past the grey hair and flannel shirt to something harder underneath. "You're not from around here. I know most people in town. I live outside town, 40 miles north. Just came in for supplies." He gestured to his truck. "You should get in your car now. Lock the doors. Make sure they're actually leaving." Sarah nodded and unlocked her car quickly, sliding into the driver's seat. She locked the doors immediately and started the engine. Through the window, she mouthed, "Thank you," again. Marcus nodded and started walking back to his truck. He did not feel heroic or particularly proud. He had simply done what needed doing. The world was full of predators and prey, and sometimes you had to remind the predators that they were not as dangerous as they thought. As he drove home, the sun fully set behind the mountains, Marcus thought about Tyler and his friends. They would tell a story tonight about some crazy old guy who threatened them. They would probably exaggerate, make themselves sound braver than they had been. But somewhere in that story, there would be a lesson that actions had consequences, that someone might push back, that the world was not as safe for predators as they believed. Whether they learned that lesson or not was beyond his control. The cabin came into view as Marcus turned onto the dirt road. It sat in a small valley surrounded by pine trees, smoke rising from the chimney where he had left a fire burning. The isolation that his ex-wife had hated was what Marcus needed. Here, he did not have to explain himself, did not have to pretend the war had not changed him. He parked and started unloading groceries, the mundane task grounding him back in normalcy. Inside, his dog, a German shepherd named Ghost, greeted him with enthusiasm. Ghost had been a military working dog who had retired the same time Marcus left the Marines. They understood each other perfectly. Marcus put the groceries away, fed Ghost, and sat down at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee. The confrontation in the parking lot played through his mind, but without emotion attached. He had assessed the situation, identified the threat level, and responded appropriately, just like he had been trained. But something nagged at him. Sarah's face when she thanked him. The relief and gratitude mixed with something else. Recognition, maybe. That look people gave when they realized they had been saved from something that could have been much worse. Marcus pulled out his phone and opened a browser. He searched for the local news, scrolling through headlines. Nothing about assaults or harassment at the grocery store, but that did not mean it had not happened before. Small towns were good at keeping secrets. He set the phone down and stared at the fire burning in the wood stove. Ghost lay at his feet, content. Outside, darkness had fully settled, and the only sounds were wind in the trees and the occasional crack of wood in the fire. Marcus thought about his daughter, wondered if anyone had stood up for her when she needed it. She lived in Seattle now, a city full of strangers. He called her once a month. Awkward conversations where neither of them knew what to say. The distance between them was not just miles. It was everything he had brought back from war that he could not explain. If you're enjoying this story, please like and subscribe. Your support helps us create more content like this. Thank you. The next day, Marcus was in town again, this time at the hardware store. He was picking up supplies to fix a fence on his property when he heard a familiar voice behind him. "Excuse me?" He turned to find Sarah standing there, out of scrubs and wearing jeans and a sweater. She looked less exhausted than yesterday, but still tired in a way that suggested long shifts were normal for her. "I wanted to thank you again," she said, "for yesterday. I've been thinking about it all night." Marcus nodded. "You already thanked me. No need to do it twice." "I know, but—" She hesitated. "Those boys, Tyler Mitchell and his friends, they've done this before, to other women. Everyone knows, but no one does anything because Tyler's dad owns half the businesses in town." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. People know and do nothing? Small town politics. Tyler's dad contributes to the sheriff's campaign. The school looks the other way because Tyler's the star quarterback. And the women he harasses are usually people passing through or people who don't have power to push back. "Like you." Sarah nodded. "I moved here 6 months ago to work at the clinic. I'm still the outsider, and I'm—" She gestured at her face, at her Asian features. "Not everyone around here is welcoming to outsiders who look different." Marcus understood immediately. Racism and bullying often went hand in hand. Predators picked targets they thought could not fight back. "Yesterday," Sarah continued, "when you stood up to them, that's the first time anyone's done that. Everyone else just looks away." "I'm not everyone else. I can see that." She paused. "Can I buy you a coffee? As a real thank you?" Marcus almost said no. He had learned to avoid connections, avoid situations where people asked questions about his past. But something in Sarah's face, the genuine gratitude mixed with exhaustion, made him reconsider. "Sure, coffee's fine." They walked to a small diner 2 blocks away. It was mid-morning, so the place was mostly empty except for a few retired men nursing coffee and reading newspapers. Marcus and Sarah sat in a booth by the window. "So what brings a Marine sniper to rural Montana?" Sarah asked after they had ordered. Marcus looked up sharply. "How did you know that?" "The way you moved yesterday, the way you assessed the situation." "My brother was Army. I recognized the training." She smiled slightly. "Plus, you have a Marine Corps tattoo on your forearm. I saw it when you were reaching for something at the hardware store." Marcus glanced at his arm where the eagle, globe, and anchor was partially visible under his rolled-up sleeve. "Good eye. So why Montana?" "Needed somewhere quiet, somewhere away from people." "Running from something or toward something?" Marcus considered his coffee. "Both maybe. I spent 20 years around violence. Needed to be somewhere I could forget that." "Is it working?" "Some days." Sarah nodded, understanding written on her face. "My brother couldn't forget either. He came back from Iraq different. Took him years to find something like peace." "Did he?" "Eventually. He became a carpenter. Said working with his hands helped. Building things instead of destroying them." Marcus thought about his ranch, the fences he mended, the barn he was slowly restoring. "I get that." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. The waitress brought their coffee and Danish pastries Marcus had not ordered, but Sarah had apparently requested for both of them. "You should know," Sarah said carefully. "Tyler and his friends are probably going to tell people about yesterday. Small town like this, word spreads. Let them talk. His father might cause trouble." "Mitchell owns the feed store, the gas station, and has investments in the grocery store. He's used to getting his way. I don't plan on getting in his way. I just want to be left alone. That might not be an option anymore." Sarah broke off a piece of Danish. "You stood up to his son. In his mind, that's an insult that needs addressing." Marcus sipped his coffee, processing this information. He had wanted isolation, had chosen Montana specifically because it was far from the complications of his old life. But apparently he had walked into a different kind of complication. "Tell me about this town," he said. "About the power structure." Sarah leaned back, organizing her thoughts. "Mitchell family has been here for 3 generations. They control most of the local economy. The sheriff, Tom Bradley, he's been in office for 15 years. He and Robert Mitchell, Tyler's dad, they're friends. Golf buddies. The mayor is in Mitchell's pocket. So is the school board. Typical small-town corruption. Not corruption exactly, just influence. Mitchell does a lot for the town. Sponsors the high school sports teams. Donates to the library. Gives people jobs. So when his son gets in trouble, people look the other way. And Tyler knows this. Tyler's been getting away with things since middle school. Started with bullying other kids. Escalated to harassment, some vandalism. There were rumors last year about something worse, but it got buried." Marcus felt the familiar cold anger he had learned to control settling in his chest. This was a pattern he recognized. Young men with power and no consequences, escalating until, eventually, they hurt someone seriously. "Has he hurt anyone? Physically?" Sarah hesitated. "There was a girl last year, Emily something. She worked at the grocery store. Tyler asked her out. She said no. He didn't take it well. She ended up quitting and moving away. No one talks about exactly what happened, but she left pretty quickly after." "No police report?" "Sheriff Bradley said there wasn't enough evidence. It was her word against Tyler's, and Tyler had 3 friends who swore nothing happened." "The same 3 from yesterday?" "Yes, they're always together. Football team, Tyler, Jake, Ryan, and Marcus." She stopped. "Wait, that's confusing. The 4th kid is also named Marcus. Marcus Vance." Marcus Hayes set down his coffee cup. "So we have a group of teenagers who have been harassing women with no consequences, protected by family influence and small-town politics. That's about the size of it. And you're telling me this because—" Sarah met his eyes. "Because you're the first person who's actually stood up to them, and I thought you should know what you're walking into." I appreciate that. Also, Sarah added, because part of me hopes you might do it again, if needed. Marcus understood what she was really asking. She wanted someone to be on her side in a town where power protected predators. But that was not why he had come to Montana. He had come to escape exactly these kinds of complications. I'm not looking to be anyone's hero, he said carefully. I just reacted to a situation yesterday, that's all. I know, but sometimes that's all it takes. One person willing to push back. They finished their coffee in silence. When they left the diner, Sarah gave him her phone number. In case you ever need a nurse or just someone to talk to who understands. Marcus took the number but did not make promises. He drove back to his cabin, Ghost greeting him at the door with his usual enthusiasm. But Marcus could not settle. He tried to work on the fence, but his mind kept returning to the conversation. He had been a sniper. His job had been to identify threats and neutralize them before they caused harm. He had been good at it, good enough that he had spent 12 years doing it across various conflict zones. But that was war. This was different. Except it was not really different. A predator was a predator whether they wore enemy uniforms or letter jackets. And ignoring them did not make them go away. It just gave them permission to keep hunting. Marcus stood at his fence line, looking out at the mountains. He had come here for peace. But peace bought through silence and looking away was not really peace. It was just avoidance. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost did not answer, but something made him pick up. Is this Marcus Hayes? A man's voice, deep and carrying authority. Who's asking? Robert Mitchell. I hear you had a confrontation with my son yesterday. Marcus kept his voice neutral. If that's what he told you. He said you threatened him and his friends, scared them for no reason. That's one version. I want to know your version. Mitchell's voice carried an edge now. Because in this town, we don't take kindly to outsiders threatening our kids. Your son and his friends were harassing a woman in the parking lot. She asked them to leave her alone. They wouldn't. I suggested they should. They left. That's what happened. Tyler says it was just harmless flirting. Tyler's lying. Silence on the other end, stretching long enough that Marcus thought Mitchell had hung up. Then, be careful, Mr. Hayes. You're new here. You don't understand how things work. My family has been in this town for 3 generations. We look after our own, and we don't appreciate outsiders causing trouble. I'm not causing trouble. I'm preventing it. Is that what you think? Mitchell's laugh was cold. Let me make something clear. You stay away from my son. You stay away from interfering in things that don't concern you. Otherwise, you might find life in Montana isn't as peaceful as you hoped. The line went dead. Marcus stood holding his phone, feeling the familiar cold calculation of a threat assessment. Robert Mitchell had just made a mistake. He had shown his hand, revealed that he considered his son untouchable, which meant Tyler would continue his behavior, would escalate, would eventually hurt someone seriously. Marcus had spent too many years protecting people to walk away from this now. He called Sarah. I need you to tell me everything you know about Tyler Mitchell and his friends. Every incident, every rumor, everything. Why? Sarah sounded surprised, but hopeful, because Robert Mitchell just made this my business. Over the next week, Marcus learned more about Tyler Mitchell than he had ever wanted to know. Sarah connected him with other women who had been harassed, people who had been intimidated, business owners who had been pressured. The picture that emerged was clear. Tyler was a predator in training, enabled by a father who valued power over accountability. Marcus also learned about the town's power structure. The sheriff's department had 3 deputies, all of whom owed their jobs to political connections. The mayor was in his 70s and mainly rubber-stamped whatever Mitchell wanted. The school board had tried to discipline Tyler once for fighting, but Robert Mitchell had threatened to withdraw his donations, and the board had backed down. It was a system designed to protect those with power and silence those without it. Marcus had seen similar systems in Afghanistan. Warlords who controlled regions through fear and patronage, immune to consequences because they had bought loyalty from those in authority. He had been trained to identify those systems and dismantle them. But this was not Afghanistan. This was Montana. And he was not a Marine anymore. He was just a man who wanted to be left alone. Except he could not be left alone, because Tyler Mitchell and his friends were still out there, still harassing women, still escalating, and no one was stopping them. The decision, when it came, was not dramatic. Marcus was sitting on his porch watching the sunset when he accepted what he had known for days. He could not walk away from this, not and still be able to live with himself. He picked up his phone and called the one person he thought might help. An old friend from his Marine days who now worked for a non-profit that investigated corruption and abuse of power in small towns. Marcus explained the situation, sent over the information he had gathered, and asked what could be done. 3 weeks later, a team of investigators arrived in town. They interviewed victims, reviewed records, built a case. The sheriff tried to shut them down, but they had federal backing. Robert Mitchell tried to intimidate them, but they were professionals who had faced worse than small-town bullies. Tyler and his friends were arrested on multiple charges of harassment and assault. The evidence was overwhelming once people felt safe enough to come forward. Tyler's bail was set high enough that even Mitchell could not easily pay it. The town fractured along predictable lines. Mitchell's supporters claimed it was a witch hunt. Others, who had been silent for years, finally spoke up about the behavior they had tolerated. Marcus stayed out of the spotlight as much as possible. He had given his statement, provided his evidence, and let the professionals handle it. But everyone knew he was the one who had started it. The outsider who had not understood that in this town you were supposed to look away. Sarah visited him one evening, bringing dinner and gratitude. "You changed things," she said. "People are talking about accountability, about not looking away. Maybe, or maybe they'll forget once this is over. Maybe. But at least for now, women can walk to their cars without being harassed." Marcus accepted that. He knew change was hard, especially in small towns with entrenched power structures. But he had done what he could. Tyler Mitchell was eventually convicted on 3 counts of assault and multiple harassment charges. He received a suspended sentence with probation, anger management, and community service. It was not as much as Marcus would have liked, but it was something. And Robert Mitchell's influence in town was diminished, his reputation damaged by his son's actions. The teenagers who had surrounded Sarah that night in the parking lot learned that actions had consequences. Most of them anyway. Jake apologized to Sarah publicly. Ryan transferred to a school in another district. Marcus Vance went to counseling and later became an advocate against bullying. Tyler himself never apologized, never showed remorse. But he was watched now, his movements restricted by probation, his reputation destroyed. The easy path his father had bought for him was gone. Marcus continued his quiet life in the mountains. The incident brought some attention he did not want, but eventually the town moved on to other concerns. He fixed his fences, cared for his ranch, and found a kind of peace in the routine. Sarah became a friend. They had coffee occasionally, talked about nothing important, and found comfort in each other's company. She understood what it meant to be an outsider. He understood what it meant to do the right thing, even when it was costly. One evening, 6 months after the parking lot incident, Marcus was sitting on his porch when his daughter called. It was not their usual monthly call. She sounded nervous. "Dad, I need to tell you something." "I'm listening. I saw the news articles about what happened in your town, about you standing up to those boys. It wasn't news, it was just local stuff. Dad." Her voice cracked slightly. "When I was in college, something similar happened to me. A guy wouldn't leave me alone. I was scared, and no one helped. I never told you because I didn't think you'd understand." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "I'm sorry that happened to you. But seeing what you did for that woman made me realize that you would have understood. You would have helped if I'd asked. Always. I know that now. She paused. Can I come visit? I'd like to see where you live. Talk about things. I'd like that too. They talked for another hour, the longest conversation they had had in years. When Marcus hung up, he felt something he had not felt in a long time. Not quite peace, but perhaps the beginning of it. He looked out at his mountains, at the valley spread below. He thought about Sarah, safe now to walk to her car. About Tyler, learning consequences. About his daughter, ready to reconnect. He had come to Montana to escape violence. But sometimes escaping meant confronting it one last time. Sometimes peace required action. Ghost nudged his hand, wanting attention. Marcus scratched the dog's ears and watched the sun set behind the mountains. Tomorrow he would mend more fence, fix the barn roof, call his daughter back. But tonight he allowed himself to feel that he had done something that mattered, that standing up had been worth it. That silence was not always the path to peace. The stars came out, brilliant against the dark sky. In the distance, an owl called. The world continued its ancient rhythms, indifferent to human drama. But here in this small valley, one man had chosen action over silence. And because of that choice, several lives had changed course. It was not heroic or dramatic. It was simply what needed to be done. Marcus went inside, Ghost following. He made dinner, read for a while, and went to bed. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But tonight he could rest knowing he had done what he was trained to do: identify a threat and neutralize it. Only this time he had done it not as a Marine, but as a man choosing to protect those who could not protect themselves. And that made all the difference. The end. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear that standing up matters. That one person can make a difference. Thanks for watching. Years later, Sarah would tell people the story of the night in the parking lot. How 4 teenagers had cornered her. How no one else had stopped. How a quiet man with grey hair had simply walked over and counted to 5. She would describe the way Tyler Mitchell's confidence had crumbled. The way the other teenagers had scattered. The way Marcus Hayes had not needed to raise his voice or his fists because he carried something deeper. Authority born from experience. Marcus never told the story himself. When asked, he would shrug and say he had just been in the right place at the right time. But those who knew him understood it was not about timing. It was about choice. The choice to stop. The choice to act. The choice to stand between predators and prey, even when walking away would have been easier. His daughter visited that summer and stayed for 3 weeks. They hiked the mountains together, fished in the river, talked late into the night about things they had never discussed before. She met Sarah and understood immediately why her father had acted. Some people, when they see someone vulnerable, instinctively protect them. Her father was one of those people. War had not created that in him. It had just sharpened it. Before she left, his daughter stood on the porch looking out at the valley. This place suits you, Dad. It's quiet enough for you to hear yourself think, but close enough to town that you can still help people. I'm not trying to help people. I just want to live my life. You say that, but when someone needed help, you didn't hesitate. That's who you are. Marcus did not argue. Maybe she was right. Maybe despite everything he had done to distance himself from his old life, some parts of it had become permanent. The awareness, the readiness, the unwillingness to look away. A year after the parking lot incident, Tyler Mitchell left Montana. His probation ended, and he moved to Colorado, where his mother's family lived. Marcus heard he was working construction, keeping his head down, staying out of trouble. Whether he had truly learned or just learned to be more careful, Marcus did not know. But Tyler was gone, and that was enough. Robert Mitchell's influence continued to decline. Businesses he owned struggled. Political allies distanced themselves. The town slowly shifted its power dynamics, creating space for new voices, new leadership. It was not dramatic, just gradual change the way most real change happens. Marcus remained on his ranch, living the quiet life he had sought. But occasionally, Sarah would call about something happening in town. Someone being bullied, someone being threatened, and Marcus would listen, assess, and if necessary, act. Not as a vigilante, not as a hero, just as someone who understood that silence enabled cruelty, and that sometimes one person standing up was all it took to change a situation. Ghost got older. The German shepherd slowed down, spent more time sleeping by the fire. Marcus got him a younger dog, a rescue named Scout, to keep him company. The two dogs became inseparable, the old soldier training the young recruit, passing on what he knew. It was a metaphor Marcus appreciated. Everything we learn, everything we survive, it all gets passed forward, the good and the bad, the violence and the peace, the silence and the action. He had been a hunter once, first of enemy combatants, then of game in Alaska. Now he hunted a different kind of prey, the systems and people that preyed on the vulnerable, not actively seeking them out, but not looking away when he found them. On quiet evenings, Marcus would sit on his porch and think about the path that had led him here. The wars, the losses, the isolation, the choice to act in a parking lot, the ripple effects that followed. His daughter's voice on the phone saying she wanted to visit. Sarah's friendship. The knowledge that Tyler Mitchell would think twice before harassing anyone again. None of it was planned. Life rarely followed the scripts we wrote for it, but there was something satisfying in knowing that his training, his experience, his pain had been transformed into something useful. He had protected people, made a difference, however small. The mountains stood eternal and indifferent. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. The world continued, full of cruelty and kindness, predators and prey, silence and action. Marcus Hayes chose action. Not always, not perfectly, but when it mattered. And in the end, that was enough. The end. Thank you for watching this story about courage, standing up for others, and finding purpose after pain. If you appreciated this message, please like and subscribe. Share with someone who needs to hear that their actions matter. That standing up to bullies and predators is always the right choice. That one person can change everything. Comment below about a time you stood up for someone or wish you had. We read every comment. Thanks for being here.